I'm really excited now to introduce you to a great friend of mine. I first met this lady in India, and I really miss India. I'm normally in India at least twice, most times 3 times a year over the last 5 years, and I'm really missing it. Yeah, anyway, so it's fine. Get off it, Grant, move on. And I met this young lady there and her amazing husband, and she got involved in some of the training that I did, and she got certified by our institute, runs an amazing coaching and transformational business both in India, and now has moved to Australia and lives in Adelaide. And when they came into the country, I jumped on a plane, went down and spent some time with them. Just beautiful people willing to serve. So Sandra Colhando is an award-winning international facilitator and leadership coach. She specializes in working with organizations in embracing daring leadership, acknowledging courage through vulnerability as a way to create strong collaborative units, changing mindsets, and building gender equality through women empowerment, diversity, and culture change initiatives. The clients include the UN, Flipkart, Nestle, Accenture, WeWork, Mindtrap, SAP, etc. Sandra's got over 10,000 hours of group work facilitation as one of the first few professional certified coaches by the International Coach Federation in India. Sandra has been invited to speak at multiple conferences and TEDx events on changing mindsets, unleashing the power of fear, self-care, and finding purpose. Sandra has authored ebooks, My Power, which is about unleashing the successful woman within us, and Mindflex, which is realizing our mind traps and how to create a powerful mindset. And that's what she's going to talk to us about today. She has authored many articles and blogs. Some of them are published in magazines like People Matters, Silicon India, and the International Coach Federation global website. And as I said, Sandra now lives in Adelaide with her amazing husband, Gatik, and their 2 daughters. Please help me welcome to the stage, just as I give her access to do something when she gets here, with a big round of applause, the amazing Sandra Colhando. Hey, Sandra, come on in. Are you there?
Yes, I'm there. Can you see me and hear me?
Yes, I can see you and hear you. Fantastic. So, hey, what I'm going to do is I've got the chat box here, so I'll just keep answering people's questions. When you get to the end of your presentation, we'll have some time for questions, and I'll come back and facilitate those for you. So without further ado, I'm going to go on mute and leave it all up to you.
Thank you, Grant. Thank you for the warm welcome and introduction. I've been listening to amazing speakers in the last day and a half, and just there's so much to learn about emotional intelligence and positive psychology that it comes to me when I think about psychology. It's a state of mind, and it has a lot to do with the way we design our lives. The choices we make sometimes far exceeds the circumstances we are put into. I want to start with the experience I had with my grandma. So when I was a little child, her bedtime stories used to be one of the most exciting times for me in the night. And she used to tell me stories about her farm days and the adventures over there. But I didn't realize that those stories ignited an interest on how the mind works and how to leverage this most powerful resource within me. She used to have a big farm. And before she had a big farm in one of the villages in India, she used to serve in the army as a nurse. So her farm life will be intertwined with stories of how she was a voluntary nurse for the villagers as well. And I remember one night she shared a story about a villager who had come to her house, really crying and inconsolable, saying that he was bitten by a scorpion bite. And at that moment, she didn't have any antidote, and she didn't have anything to treat him except for Vicks Vapor Rub. So what she did was she put the vapor rub on the wound, and she told him after a few minutes, you'll see the poison ooze out of your wound, and that's when you'll start healing. Now, if you use vapor rub, you know, and especially in summers, and especially in Indian summers, vapor rub starts perspiring. So on the wound, it started perspiring. And then there you see the poison is coming out. And immediately the villager was completely calm. And after a few moments, he thanked her and he said, "Thank you so much for healing me." The healing all happened through his own immune system. But he believed the story she told her. He believed that the medicine that was put on the wound actually healed. And she had many stories of how people heal themselves, the power of mind. And unconsciously, that seeded in me to discover this portal of mind strength. Now, I haven't reached the space of completely healing myself, but I have witnessed the power of unleashing barriers and uncovering limitless possibilities, both for myself and the people that I work with, and simply by understanding the mind traps and by flexing them to serve us. And over the last decade, I've been blessed with working with senior leaders, entrepreneurs, social workers, individuals as a leadership and life coach. And I look forward to sharing part of that learning, part of the toolkit that we've been able to co-create together, that helps people identify first their mind traps and then challenge them for a more fulfilled life. Now I'll begin with, and I'll just share a couple of slides here to make the presentation a little more interesting as well, for all of you, or some of us like me who's visually inclined. But I'm going to start with understanding of biology a little bit. And what do I mean by biology? For me, it's that we live in two worlds. We live in the external world of the mind, of the brain, and we also live in the internal world of the mind. And I won't go too much in the brain because we have the brain master, Alistair Schofield, coming up soon. But to touch upon it, we know that the brain is a physical organ that controls the functions of many organs in our body. It is the command center for nervous system. And the goal for the brain is to create a sense of homeostasis, a sense of internal balance in the body. And one of the critical functions of the brain is to protect the body. And most of us would know the amygdala and the limbic brain can prompt an instant survival response of fight or flight if it perceives danger, whether it's a physical danger or even emotional danger. So when we feel fear, talking on stage, or meeting a stranger at a networking event, or giving up your whole lifestyle and starting something afresh, it assumes that the situation is a threat and sends reactions across the body to get out of it or reject that situation. And we may recognize it by us backing down or us procrastinating, giving up, and sometimes feeling unwell. Our mind, on the other hand, is a part of the invisible, transcendental world of thought and feeling and belief and imagination. According to Daniel Siegel in his book, Mindsight, he says the mind involves a flow of energy and information. Energy is the capacity to carry out an action, or even thinking a thought takes energy, sometimes more energy than actually action. And we feel, for example, we feel radiant energy when we help someone, or we're sitting in the sun, or we feel neural energy when we're reading, or we're learning, or we're listening to somebody we like. And information in this case, in this context, is the meaning we make out of the information. Even the idea of a stone can have a meaning. And that meaning is created by a mind, not necessarily by the stone itself. In fact, in certain cultures, a stone is worshipped because there is a meaning behind that stone. So the mind search of meaning has led to innovations and inventions and growth like never experienced by any species before. And that search of meaning takes us consciously to the path of risk, threat, uncertainty, things the brain is designed to avoid. And this coexistence of the brain and the mind, and a need to be safe and yet evolve, often leads us to mind traps. And based on the work I've done and experience working with people and study on the subject, I wanted to share 3 of the 6 mind traps that I've come to know. The first mind trap is harmony. The second, perfection, and third, future telling. So I'm going to be sharing these 3 mind traps and also ways to overcome these mind traps. So let's start with the harmony trap. As humans, we are drawn to agreement as a sense of connection and as a force of survival. Our capacity to collaborate makes up for our deficiencies. We are wired for connection. Matthew Leberman's research, and he's a professor in UCLA, and he's written a very interesting book called Social. His research shows that our brains make us sensitive to social interactions. He found that social pain, like exclusion or rejection, is experienced in the brain in the same way as physical pain. Therefore, disagreements at work or with family members are difficult to handle well. Our aversion to social pain could push us towards artificial harmony. And this desire to be in harmony can sap us of saying what we want to say, of having the courage to speak up, to say the hard things, and sometimes have authentic conversations. Think of a time when you've had to maintain a relationship with people you have conflict. It could be a family member, it could be a colleague, where it took a lot of stress just to maintain a harmonious relationship. And at the end of the day, it just drained a lot of energy and you didn't feel good about it. And what's worse is the relationship didn't improve. In fact, became worse. When I do this work with UN staff, and many of them are living in crisis situations, in the middle of wars and emergencies, managing stress far more than we've experienced in a lifetime, even they struggle surfacing conflicts or saying things that they mean or speaking up. And sometimes they feel not speaking up maintains a relationship. But guess what? The disagreements are still there even when we don't talk about it. It leaks out in small ways like non-compliance, ignoring, being mentally absent, at work, gossiping, and it definitely leads to toxic relationships or impacts psychological safe spaces, whether it's family or whether it's work. The cost of staying in a harmony trap is very high. It builds distrust. You don't trust what the other person is saying. It drives inefficiencies because I'm not saying what I mean, and that kind of lengthens the whole process. And then it creates a lot of stress just to be seen in harmony. We can disagree with one another and yet expand our possibilities. Sometimes it's not about destroying relationships, but deepening it. And I remember yesterday in the morning, I was attending our first speaker, Dr. Laura Benson, and she had mentioned that the first step to emotional intelligence is self-awareness of our emotions. And it's the same here also in identifying our mind traps. How do I identify that I'm operating in this particular mind trap? So some of the emotions that lead us or guide us that I'm in harmony trap is when I'm feeling insecure about a relationship, or I fear a sense of rejection or exclusion in this group, or I may feel humiliated if I were to speak up, or may impact my colleague or relationship or what they may think of me. These emotions actually lead you to bring awareness that you're operating from a trap. Whenever I'm operating this trap, I tell myself, so that I kind of created a mantra for each of these traps, because no matter how much work you do in this area, you do still fall in these traps. These traps never go. But what's good is you identify, you catch it, and then you move it faster. So one of the mantras that I use for this trap is, okay, it's going to be a difficult conversation, but let me look at how can this conflict deepen my relationship? And how can we get it to a better space than maybe are right now? So on that note, we're talking about better spaces. Let's move on to the next trap, which is perfection. Now, in my workshops, I usually do a poll. I have the list of all the mind traps. And I say, okay, what's the mind trap that's most common for you, or your pet mind trap, or you resonate with most? And guess what comes as the number one trap for most of us? Is a perfection trap. It's a trap where everything I must do must be perfect, else I'm not good enough. And I fear failure, I fear rejection, and therefore I don't do anything. So it's an all or nothing trap. Everything seems to be black and white. An example might be, I got fired, I'm rubbish at everything. In other words, if situations doesn't go exactly to plan, you immediately feel that you're a failure. And the problem is life isn't black or white. Nothing in life is perfect. Even though you can get the job done, doesn't mean I'm a failure. There are better things to come. One of the biggest causes to perfection trap is missing life-changing opportunities. And I know that because for many years I was operating under perception trap. This was my biggest trap initially. Around 20 years ago, I got an opportunity in internal job posting in my first organization in GE, which was a trainer's IJP. And I'd applied for it. My manager called me saying that, it's really good and I think you'll be one of the best candidates to apply and most likely you'll get through. And then I realized to get through the internal job posting, I had to go and present in front of another trainer. And that's when I chickened out. I said, oh my God, I'm not going to be perfect. And that trainer is so much better. He is a trainer already. And all my flaws will come out. I'm going to make mistakes and won't make any sense. So what I did was I went to HR and I took my internal job posting and I tore it up. And I just fell deep into the perfection trap and lost a beautiful opportunity. And that opportunity came to me again 13 years later. And that too through a lot of hard work. This one landed in my lap, but the second opportunity through a lot of hard work, I went through a couple of years of self-awareness situations, spiritual shopping, figuring out what my life purpose was, what will bring me joy. And then finally, guess what? I landed up what was given to me 13 years ago, and I rejected it. And do a lot of work in training and coaching people. And that's when I realized that sometimes traps can cost you a lot. 13 years for me. And I bet each one of us in some point of time said this to ourselves, that I'm not completely ready. And let's try next time. I've heard myself say that so many times. And that's when I realize I'm getting into a perfect trap. We wait for the perfect opportunity, perfect time, and there is no such thing. There's no such thing as a perfect opportunity, a perfect time. It only comes in future when you look in the past. In the past, then you figure, that was a perfect opportunity. You miss that in the present. And the emotions that guide us and help us to figure out we're in this trap is when there's a sense of anxiety and nervousness, something new I'm trying, or irritability because I'm not getting it my way. Or there is a fear of failure, or there's a sense of humiliation if I try something. There could be an impact to my reputation. So these are emotions and sense of beings that could help us identify which trap we're sitting in, a perfection trap right now. My biggest mantra for this trap is strive for progress, not perfection. Keep telling myself, strive for progress, not perfection. It's progress over perfection all the time. Now I'm going to move to the last trap, the third trap, which is a future telling trap. And we really realize that we get into this trap. And I know there's been a lot of talk about positive psychology and how critical that is. Yet, when we think about the thoughts we have in our mind, especially about the future, we spend a lot of time in a state of visualizing negative outcomes. So it's a mind trap that says, I know how things will turn out, and therefore I'm not going to try. I'm scared of trying. So are you predicting how things will turn out before they actually happen? Are we predicting situations with only negative outcomes? And as I studied this in more detail, I realized that there is a little component of brain over there where it's trying to protect us. So you don't want to try something new because we don't know what the experience would be like. So let's try something that we already know. which is safe. And this trap is very closely tied to a thinking trap known as catastrophizing. Its triggers are often centered around ambiguity, or when you don't have clarity. For example, you receive a vague text from a supervisor or your partner, or you get ill and you're suspecting it's something far worse than what you have. I remember for me, it was waiting for my high school results. And that was terrible for me because I would plan the whole future, pathetic, bleak future for myself, because I would just expect the worst results and circumstances that would come my way. And that's when you start catching yourself is, what am I doing over here in this moment? And although it's useful to base our strategies on previous experiences and sometimes failures, but that could be rather limiting and may make us feel that, or make us feel sure about things which haven't yet happened. And past experiences and failure should actually help us make better decisions and not inhibit our decisions. And I remember a time when I work with people, I would come back with, okay, so what's the experiment you're going to try? And often I would get an answer was, yeah, that's an interesting experiment to try, but. And as soon as that but would come in, there would be all the clauses that why the experiment would work without even giving it a try. So I remember my master trainer who had taught me Gestalt, he said, but is a very dangerous word. Try and keep but away out of your vocabulary. Because when you commit to something, don't put any buts there, because the but will pull you back. And that's when we realize that, okay, we're getting into the future trap. And then we catch ourselves over there. So the emotions that help us here is to identify is what are you thinking about the future? So if you are planning something out, if there's a project or a new job or a new assignment, or you want to be an entrepreneur, what's the emotional state you are in? Are you in an emotional state of bleakness, or are you in an emotional state of excitement? Are my thoughts creating inertia and procrastination, or is it helping me drive forward? And is it creating anxiety and depression, or curiousness and excitement? So these are emotions that will help us lead to understand what space we are operating from and to break those barriers for us. So again, my mantra for this one is, okay, great. I don't know what the future holds. It can go either way, but I want to focus on what possibilities could there be for me to grow. So there's no guarantees, but there's obviously guarantees for me to grow. So let's look at those possibilities and move towards that direction. Okay, now I want to take you through Mindflex, which is a 3-step approach to overcoming a mind trap. And if you're coaches, or if you're trainers, or if you're behavioral scientists, you'd recognize this. Therapists use this, behavioral scientists use this. It's very similar to the CBT, the cognitive behavior therapy, or the REBT methods. It's where you check where your thoughts are, see what's happening to it, and how do you replace it. So the first step is identify your traps. Most mind traps don't look like traps. In fact, they're so unconscious that it sometimes begins being part of your being. And I don't know if you think about people and notice, there's some people who come across negative, or there's some people who come across positive or joyful, because those are people who have caught on to those traps and have been living into those traps, that it's become a part of their being. And that's really deep rooted. Takes a lot of work, but there is possibility of getting out of those traps. Traps don't announce themselves, so you have to actually go find them. And these thoughts could, help you take actions or also inactions that hinder your growth. One of the ways to find and identify these traps is what I mentioned. Notice your feeling. What are you feeling right now? Are you feeling anxious? Are you feeling sad? Are you feeling scared, fearful? And then go back and proceed. Where did that feeling come from? So what is it? Was it a situation? Did somebody say? Was it a thought that's running in my mind? And sometimes the thought is a little more clearer. For example, if I've been asked for a new project to take on a new assignment, or I've been asked to speak in an event that may have many speakers who are far more experienced and credible in my line of work, am I asking myself, or am I falling into the perfection trap that I don't think I have enough information right now, so should I back out of this opportunity? Or what I'm going to say is not going to be anything new for people to hear. Now, when I hear myself saying those statements, I identify I'm getting into the perfect trap or the future telling trap as well, either one of the traps. And then I said, okay, I'm going to catch it. And there are many ways of catching it. And I was just reading it the other day. There is something called say stop. When you realize there's a worry-ridden thought that comes to your mind, and there's a thought that comes, you just say stop. You, in a way, stop that thought from growing. And for many years, I used to use the word, whenever that thought would come, I would say, love you. And I have no idea why I used to say it. But every time any thought would come, any thought that's restricting me, I would just say, love you. And in that moment, I would just stop the thought from going deeper. And then I would, replace it and have a conversation and get out of it. So the sign, it's probably a flick of your finger, or say stop it, or make a sound. Whatever works for you, just try and, just seize that trap from going deeper. So once you identify the trap, the next step is challenge it. The challenging could be a little tricky is because if you are emotionally vested in the trap, then it's very difficult for you to play the devil's advocate, because every time you would ask questions, and questions could be, what are the possibilities before jumping to conclusions, or is this thought a fact or an opinion, what supports it rationally? We need to be a little bit outside that emotional investment to be able to answer these questions as rationally as possible. So detaching emotions from their thoughts. So if I'm, for example, extremely anxious, extremely fearful, and I'm sitting in a future telling trap that everything is bleak, my business is shut down, I had to ask people, I had to retrench people, I'm finished, I have to file for bankruptcy, and it hasn't happened, but I'm kind of predicting and going in that direction, then I'm not using my resources within me to do what I can do in this moment to help this situation. And that's when I need to, if I can detach my emotions and have these conversations, great. Else, speak to somebody, a family member, a coach, a friend, an ex-colleague. Sometimes just voicing it out, saying, I have this thoughts coming in my mind. I want to rationalize it, whether it's actually in my head or whether it's actually true. I want you to just hear me out. And sometimes just your own voice gives you clarity. You don't need to have the other person give you any answers. And that clarity, you'll get answers to the third bit, which is replace that mind trap, replace that thought. And I usually say replace it with art. Art, artistic? No, it means ART, alternative realistic thought. So what do you mean by alternative realistic thought is, and we're not saying go positive always, but what can I realistically look at that can be optimistic in the situation? So if this is my situation and I have to retrench people, it's impacting my business, what possible outcomes can come from here? What can I do with this? And what's my learning? What's my growth? What's something new I can pick up from here? And I notice when I shift my vision from what has happened to what the possibilities, I move towards growth, I move towards action, I move towards driving my own decisions. And that's when I start overcoming these mind traps and taking actions and breaking barriers and unleashing potentials and finding out new solutions. So mind is very powerful. Yet we spend very little time reflecting on the way we think. The way we think about ourselves turn into our reality. If we draw inaccurate conclusions about who we are and what we are capable of doing, we'll limit our potential. So I want to close with a quote from Jesse Jackson. If my mind can conceive it and my heart can believe it, I know I can achieve it. All the best to all of you. Thank you.
Fantastic. Love that. Thank you so much, Sandra.
Thank you, Grant.
That was brilliant. So I'm just checking. I've just asked people to type in questions. We've got a little bit of a shy audience this afternoon. They're not doing as much typing. We have had some comments. You know, you really hit home talking about perfection's not a healthy goal. There's never perfect opportunities, and it's all about progress. So yeah, I'd really like you to just, if you can, just give us a little bit more around that. Why do you think that we want to get everything perfect all the time?
I think in our mind, there's a lot of risk associated with it, because we built years creating this image of ourselves through education, through experiences, to the kind of friends we hold on to, job experience. So it took a lot of work and energy for me to create this persona I'm sharing with all of you. Now, I'm going to do everything to protect this persona. And one of the ways to protect this persona is try and not risk myself too much. And therefore, I want to be seen as somebody who's good in what I'm doing, or the persona I'm trying to show to the world. So whether it's a coach or trainer. And so therefore, I'm more inclined towards moving towards a perfect track for you to see that I'm the perfect trainer, or I'm the perfect professional that I'm trying to pitch. And therefore, we tend to hang on more on the perfection trap than any other traps, according to me.
Love that. I always tell people that, perfection's never the goal. In my understanding, there's only ever been one perfect man on the planet, and they crucified him. So I don't want to be perfect. So yeah, and look, from a coach's perspective, because you're a very highly awarded and experienced coach, could you explain, because we've got a little bit of time, could you explain around that perfection, how it could be for some people a self-sabotage strategy?
I remember as a coach, right?
Yeah.
So I remember my initial coach here. This was about 10 years ago when I just got coach certified. I had this beautiful crown there up on my head that, yes, I'm a life coach and I'm going to just help people and heal people and do what. And I'm getting a coaching session with such a high need, my own need to help you and solve you and help you unleash your potential. And I wanted to be that perfect coach for my coachee. That would end up pushing too much or putting all the practices in place and sometimes losing the essence of what a coach is. It's about the client. It's about the person you're speaking to. There is no you in this equation. And even if in that moment, this thing is not working out for them, you're not being able to bring value, you're not being able to serve, it's okay to stop and move out. And sometimes initially that fear of, why is that person not getting the value? And I'm going to do everything to show that coaching works and that I can help you, that I would, harm the relationship. And that's been my learning, that it's okay that you may not be the best coach for everyone on this planet. And that's okay to, just honor it and say, hey, I'm not serving you well. I don't think I'm a good fit for you. And why don't you I can help you find somebody else. And that's been one of my biggest learning, is to admit my own weaknesses, my own shortcomings, be more aware, and then step out.
Fantastic. Yeah, look, totally understand that. And on top of that, I also find too that sometimes people will set perfection as a goal knowing that it's not achievable. So therefore, subconsciously holding themselves back from getting the result because they don't feel worthy of getting it anyway. Have you ever experienced that?
Absolutely. In fact, when we did this work a couple of months ago, Gatik and I was in the workshop. So we were talking about happiness as a goal. And so one of the participants said, I do not look at happiness as goal, because if I start feeling happy, I have become complacent and I have not met my goal. And my goal is to be that CEO, that perfect professional. And therefore, I would not allow myself to feel anything less than to work. And so at the end of it, when we did this workaround, he said, you know what? I sometimes feel I'm running on a treadmill and I don't know how to get out of it. I really don't know. That scares me. What's going to happen to me when I get off the treadmill? I just don't know how to do it. And that's that perfect trap when you sit in it, because it doesn't end. It doesn't end. You can make the perfect recipe, and then what's next? You could have a perfect talk. What's next? And so then what's next never stops.
Exactly. Love that. All right. So we've got time for a question, and we've got one here that says, what is the place of spirituality in overcoming mind traps? I always love this question. So I could answer it, but you're the speaker, so I'll give it to you.
Now you can jump into, Grant. I think for me, spirituality has a lot to do with it. Like I said, it starts becoming a state of being. And it's just not a trap. We identify I'm a trap, but it's a state of being. And the more we are aware of us, what is spirituality? For me, spirituality is not necessarily religious. It's about me being aware of who I am in all its perfect imperfections and being okay and loving myself for all of that. And the more you love yourself, you will love your traps. And that's why I unconsciously started calling all my traps out as love you, because you were there for a reason. You were there to protect me in some point. And now, of course, I don't need that protection. And therefore, you become a trap. So I want to love you, acknowledge you, and also let you go. And that I feel is part of your spiritual growth, spiritual practices. Meditation helps over there, because that's when you're being aware of your emotional state and being aware of how you're operating and what you're doing.
I love that. I think that's a perfect way to start the answer. So for me, whenever anyone asks me that question, the first thing that as coaches we want to understand is, well, what does spirituality mean for you? Because people have many different understandings of what it is, and it's a personal thing. So that goes exactly what you were saying before, that it's not about the coach, it's about the person that you're coaching. And I'm totally with you. I think spirituality, and this is my opinion, has nothing to do with religion whatsoever. For me, spirituality is a deeper internal part of me that is all about a relationship with my creator. It's not to do with a religion or a set of rules. So I think that's fantastic. Okay, Sandra, look, hey, we want to just say thank you so much from the bottom of our heart for you coming and sharing your wisdom and your knowledge with us. People are saying, yes, sometimes we feel that everyone is far above us and leaving us behind in the dust. People are saying this is great. What seems perfect today looks imperfect tomorrow. Great insight. I can truly relate to this. So it makes so much sense. Thank you, Sandra, for the clarity. And Prey said, you may not be the best coach for everyone. Thanks for this. Yeah, I love that point. And I'm certainly not, and that's why we have so many coaches in the world. So I think that's fantastic. So thank you once again, Sandra. And I really look forward to continuing to do more things like this. I'd love to get you on an interview on one of our future People Builders YouTube channel interviews, and we can talk a little bit more about the other 3 mind traps if you wanted to do that.
Sure. Thank you, everyone, all of you listening and seeing. Unfortunately, I can't see you, but lots of love and hugs to all of you. Thank you, Grant.